Hi, folks. Bob Mannery here. You're listening to A2D Radio, real sports talk radio for the fans, by the fans, no agenda. These guys are the best in the business. Hashtag it. No notes.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Fort Knox with the Car Knox Boys. I'm Kyle here with my boy Brian, and we're here to bring you a hell of a show for the first time. We're really excited about it. Brian?
How you going? How's it doing, everybody? Kyle and I here having a good time. Really excited to bring you guys a lot of knowledge and insight into the sports card industry and how it relates to sports in general.
And if you've never had any sort of interaction before within this, or maybe you're someone who hasn't touched on it since their childhood, coming back into it, maybe have kids of your own at a point like this, it's something really exciting to see something so nostalgic, so special for a lot of people really pop back up. And I think there's a lot of reason to continuously be excited about it. It's been quite the year for us. And I don't know if you want to touch on any of that, but it's certainly been quite the ride already.
Yeah, for sure. 2020 has been obviously for a lot of us kind of wild in many ways. And the card industry in its own right has been quite a ride. We saw the pandemic come around and everybody got scared about the industry and how, values and stuff may drop off, and instead it just went the other way. And the industry is basically as hot as it's ever been. Never really have seen it this strong in my lifetime.
Yeah, no, it's certainly been a lot of fun. And I know we talk about it a lot, but to give everyone some background. So Brian's been in this way too long, but in the best way possible. I almost wish I was in this as long as he was. And I really kind of saw it as a hobby, got brought into it, got excited about it, explored it further, turned into a bit more than a hobby, and then all of a sudden a business. And that's been a lot of fun, thanks to a lot of help from Brian. And we actually met at a card show, fittingly enough, and connected over it immediately. Being in that kind of environment, it's exploded from there. I think a lot of people have found new opportunities to branch out, meet people, find ways into the business, and just like we've kind of done up to this point, really build something out of what went away for so long. And people look back into eras, what we call the junk wax era, the 80s into the 90s, where so many cards were printed and it was the most popular thing there was. And then it just went away because of how much was out there and how simplified it was just to come back, reignite all of that and be amplified, everything it was, maybe to a whole nother level. We're talking about a industry into the billions. That's with a B, and people can't imagine it. The card sales we've seen, the prices they've gone for as we continue. Really special stuff, and I think we're just getting started.
Yeah, to touch on that, the billions aspect. I mean, one card recently sold for $3.5 million, and that alone might make some people go, "What? A piece of cardboard, $3.5 million?" Well, that card was of South Jersey's own Mike Trout. It is his one of one superfractor rookie autograph, or not even rookie autograph, prospect autograph. Something we'll touch on. We'll get into a little more depths of what that means. But yes, a piece of cardboard sold for $3.5 million. Which piece of cardboard. Yes, again, a piece of cardboard. I mean, it's mind blowing, but again, this day and age, you're seeing the card market come back, and in a way, I think it's replacing the art market for certain generations and for certain demographics, I guess you could say.
It's an art of its own.
Sports cards do have mass appeal and have been something that have been around for 140 years or so now. They're, the earliest cards. So it's something that's never gone away with everything that's happened in this world. There's continuously been sports cards. And it's something here that I don't think you're going to see go away anytime soon.
Yeah, no, for sure. We're just touching the surface here, and getting into details of where things have come about. a popular discussion has been the demographic that's really branched back in, being those that were in it in its most popular states. It's fathers of fathers of fathers having kids who saw it at different stages and then felt that energy again, brought it to those generations. And I'm 23 years old. I'm seeing it amongst my age, amongst years younger, and can only imagine if it holds anything like what it's at now, the potential for people, in their 20s and their 30s who are seeing this, enjoying it, but it's turned into such an investment opportunity. It's turned into a complete chance to take money, an understanding of sports. I mean, cards outside of sports, even things that we'll touch on in the future, but getting that opportunity to really, instead of blocking money up on a financial sheet and looking over those numbers, being able to go, hey, like, I'm gonna turn on the game tonight and I'm gonna have some kind of stake in it. We see fantasy sports becoming so popular, sports gambling at its peak as well. They're all complementing each other. And the question becomes, why not this? A tangible market for us to, kind of wreak havoc and have our way with. And I think a lot of people have latched onto that. Businesses are springing out of nowhere. Shows are coming out now, and it's only the beginning for it, with all the potential that's there and probably continue to be there, because we've seen and have been lucky enough to see the financial aspect of it, the business aspect of it. And it's not about that. Our passion's there 100%. That's what it's always been about. It's always going to be about. But at the end of the day, what an opportunity for us. And I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yeah, I mean, that essentially brings us to the poll question for tonight, which are sports cards a viable investment into the future? History has shown us that sports cards do outperform the stock market. Historically, you can go back to the 08, a little bit of a recession, if you want to call it, in 08. Cards did not decline as much as the stock market. That alone right there tells me that your higher end cards, your Jordans, your LeBrons, your anybody else I'm forgetting, like off the top of my head, Ruths, things like that, Mantles, those cards do not depreciate like you'll see the stock market do. With that being said, going forward, you're seeing so many more investment avenues for sports cards, and I think you're only going to see that continue here into the future. I think we're just scratching the surface.
And it's been fun to, especially for myself. I mean, you had such a deeper knowledge when you and I started working together over all this and talking about it day in and day out. You had known what card was what, where it came from, down to values and everything in between. And then for me, providing a completely different perspective, I think it was great to complement each other in a way, because there's so much to know. And that's one thing I can't express enough. You need to educate yourself on what you're getting into. A lot of people started to think buying any sort of card with a certain name on it provides a value, and that unfortunately isn't the way it works. But coming in really not as knowledgeable, but with new perspective to someone that's been in it so long, it's really it's an interesting thing to really take a look at and see where it leads. When we discuss cards that I first bought into, you're well aware of them as anyone. There were certain parts about that I know you wouldn't have done. You would not have done. Now, it doesn't mean there was a right or wrong. I happened to win on a lot of them. And then we got into points where there were cards you would not have bought, and I took a hit on some of them. And it's interesting to see that breakdown. Yeah, so the market got real hot. I mean, red hot beginning of the year into the middle of the year, dealing with the pandemic and everything. And that's where you see so many of these cards spiked up. If you look at it across a graph, you see all these different pages that post, that statistical information about percentage increase or dollar increases. And you analyze them and you see that same spike in the same area and it came down. I think people thought oh no, it was fun while it lasted for a little bit. It wasn't a crash at all. And if you want to explain a little bit more about why it wasn't.
I think what you're seeing is like, the pandemic forced a lot of people to be home. So what did people need to do while quarantining? People needed an escape, something to entertain them while not being able to go out, can't go to movies, can't go to sporting events, can't go to concerts, anything like that. Any sort of public, interaction was non-existent. So what did people do? They turned to the internet. The internet provides quite a few, ways to entertain yourself. However, a lot of people are sitting home with nothing to do. They're stuck home. They get tired of their phones or Facebook or social media, whatever. And a lot of these people, your adults, your parents, your 30 to 45 demographic, a lot of them collected as kids with their parents. And I think what happened is people ended up researching back into the card market, wanting to get back involved. And as people started to see like what cards were going for, it made people kind of, they try to do a little bit of research, figure out what could be next. What could be the next thing where I can make some money off of this card because it's undervalued or whatever. It brought a lot of people into that space. Thus, you saw a lot of values rise across the board from everything. If you had a massive collection in February, it was probably worth 3 to 4x come June. So what that did was, it was that bull market at the beginning. Everybody's throwing money, and a lot of people didn't understand where they were throwing money. They were throwing money into things because the masses were telling them, hey, go buy this or go buy that. Where you really can make some money in this industry is finding
that insight.
Finding the undervalued things that aren't owned by the masses, the limited, the rare stuff.
Sure.
That kind of stuff right there is where you haven't seen values crash as hard.
Right. I wouldn't even say they've crashed. And that's kind of what I was alluding to.
Right.
People viewed that coming from such a high peak point that was almost unreasonable to where they are now, that I don't think it was a crash, because I think where we're at is a plateau, but the plateau is higher than it was before we got into this, heat up in the industry by a wide margin. So it went, a settled line here, industry booms up to here and comes here. That's not a crash. It's a correction. And you're seeing it across a ton of cards where, from an investment standpoint, that's something that that's something that's going to happen in any sort of market. But something you mentioned before was the potential returns on something like that, where the losses are at a point like that. Doing this wisely, again, in that kind of manner, you're in 1x to a card. You're in whatever you got that at, whatever value you got that at. And then we've seen certain cards. I know you have 10x,
more than that,
20x.
Yeah.
Keep it seriously though. There's some incredible stuff that has happened throughout that spike where it's unimaginable. And putting it equivalent to the stock market, you go into a year, and I have business education background. To my understanding, 7 to 10% is your good solid year in the stock market across a diverse portfolio.
Right.
If you went through this past year of sports cards, not even that knowledgeable, and gave it your best shot and had any knowledge of sports or whatever it may be, and made some decent plays, I don't know how you didn't double, triple your money.
It's funny.
At the least.
There's a comment here from Prism 280 that I see. Let me drop this up here. So he sold some ungraded Luka base for $450, 2 other Lukas for $1,200 in the past 2 to 3 weeks.
Right.
That right there, talk about the Luka Prism, for example, just to give you guys a little bit of an idea who may not have any idea about this card market at all. That specific card, the Luka base Prism, that Prism 280 sold for $450 a year ago. 1 year ago, to this date, you could have bought that card for $20 to $30, maybe $40 on the high end as we got a little more into the beginning of the season. But before the season, that card was $25, $30.
Well, I don't even know if you recall this, but I remember calling you on days, and thanks, Prism, for the comment, when we were talking about the rise of those. It was coming up on people's radars as an investment opportunity when those cards were going from $20 ungraded. They were just the card out of pack. So we use that term a lot, ungraded or raw card out of the pack, or a graded card we'll get into more detail about. But the simple card, if it was a $20 card, they increased to it being a $50 card. And I remember calling you and telling you that I was planning to buy them up at $70 a piece. And I went on there and I, 10, 15 of them that I felt it was a viable move, and that this was only the beginning, panned out well across a lot of different popular cards.
For sure.
I'm not patting myself on the back. I think anybody who had any sort of sports fanhood on a base level is watching these games, watching a kid come in and, even through some injuries, even through some questions about what abilities he had at first, putting up 40-point triple doubles left and right in this league, where it immediately sparked an interest. And I, wasn't analyzing deep into any statistics that the average sports fan couldn't understand. So, you see those cards and as was mentioned, selling the same card for $450 a piece. So that means if you bought these even at the $70 mark and,
held them for a year.
Yeah, don't have to grade them or anything like that. Simple as can be. If you put them in a drawer somewhere because you wanted to tie up that capital instead of going for a Roth IRA or something of that nature, if you bought these cards and put them in a box, you saw 6x plus.
And that's if you paid 70.
Right. I mean, there are people that bought before it, and there are people that bought after it who also did phenomenally well. Right. If you bought that card or any cards of that nature, halfway up the slope, you could have bought those at $200 a piece. Right. And I don't think the time frame
still
2xing, and I don't think the time frame was that long either. Right. I don't think the time frame was really long from $200 a piece over to $400 a piece. Right. I think it happened very quickly. So, seeing that kind of thing, that there's no you lost if you didn't get in at 20 or 50 or 70 or 200. I don't know who's to say anymore that you're losing buying in at 450. There's different ways to analyze it. Maybe that's more up for discussion, the way we've seen things pan out. But nonetheless,
another conversation.
Right. And nonetheless, there's so much opportunity across so many different sports too. And, that's a good jump into another topic for us, which is the array of opportunities across sports that's come up.
Right.
Because I think when I explain to friends or people, what I'm involved with or what I enjoy doing, it's really, so much more related to the baseball card, mindset that people kind of take. People immediately say, oh, you have baseball cards. My dad had a box of baseball cards, and they don't really bring up anything else aside from that. But going through the sports, basketball, football, soccer, all the way down the line, there's a lot of different aspects of this whole thing that have come into play.
No, 100%. I mean, I think what we really need to look at is, and what we will dive into as weeks go on here. Next week, a little sneak preview, just so happens to be the NBA draft. So we'll be on here live, 2 hours, NBA draft coverage, and how it'll affect NBA card markets, players markets specifically. But that's for next week. But there's tons of investment opportunity across all sports. If you play DFS, if you're a gambler, if you bet on games, if you're a nut, if you're just a sports junkie and you follow sports very closely, you know who the good players are, who the guys who are sleepers for fantasy baseball purposes or football, whatever, basketball. That stuff tends to correlate to the sports card market. If you look, right, fantasy football sleepers preseason. You'll see
Same
a lot
thing.
of their cards will be cheap, most of them, unless they end up, being the mainstream sleeper that's everybody's following. If you get that under the radar guy, and you buy their cards up cheap and they pop and they're a top 5-10 fantasy option, chances are you've absolutely crushed your investment as well on their cards.
I mean, I'm almost seeing where it can correlate so much so that you have almost like a fantasy sports card market where the cards being tangible serve in the same way that the stake you have in those players would work. I mean, there's probably some model, you see these graphics of different things on sports pages, and it's build your dream team. You get $20. You have to pick a guy from row 5, row 4. The same kind of things can happen with sports cards. Now, understanding those values a little bit different in a lot of ways, but there are different aspects of this that are going to continue to branch out and correlate with those of sports gambling or those of fantasy sports. And that's something that I think is going to breed new energy. As much has been brought in and it's kind of settled down, I wouldn't be surprised to see, these different companies kind of partner in potentially, because we're talking about like FanDuel or any of those major betting. Like, what if Barstool Sportsbook got a hold of some form of card understanding and a market like that? I could see so many opportunities to partner. And these are major businesses, and this is a major industry with so much revenue potential above what it's already done. To think of the numbers it's already at, I'm sure some new parties are going to enter the chat on that. And we see all these different products coming out for these different sports. You do your research. There's different ones going back years and years and years. There's cards going back into the 1800s, even. And when you look at it now, all of a sudden, it's just per sport, dating back to some of the biggest names that there ever were as athletes. You had a certain list of cards that came out through their career, and each one, some of them they only had some cards throughout the 50s, and it was all from one set, or they had cards in the 50s and then 2 in the 70s.
Regular tops.
Right. It was
regular
the same
fleer.
set. But now, this is what I really wanted to dig into. We're talking about so many products, but so many per sport,
right?
In a lot of ways. Now, there's a lot of money to be had. There's a lot of people, enough demand to succumb for that. It's not everybody who collects a guy or invests in a guy wants one of that card. So there's a lot of room for things like this, how many shares of that guy there are, but it wavers the value of some of them. And when we discuss this, you're looking at products where we're looking at a scheduled release of basketball. That was the discussion we were having.
Yep.
Basketball has, I want to say, in a 4 to 6 month span.
Season is about that long, yeah. 6
Well,
months more.
Well, no, but not even for the season, just for the card releases coming up at the beginning of the year.
21 might be a little bit different because it's going to be pushed back because of the pandemic.
Okay.
But normal release is probably about 8 months, honestly. Usually it'll run from October to May or June even, because you'll see products like how Opulence and stuff came out.
Well, fair. So maybe it would be a little more spread out, but we're talking about a 2 month to 3 months. So it's still the same draft classes. It's still It's still the same. You're targeting rookies in these new products, the new guys. I mean, that's what those newer sets are about for the most part.
Correct. It's always about the rookies, the new guys, new teams, new
at
jerseys.
least for the new sets, because those guys who were there prior had their original card, the first card they appear on, and that's what seems to hold the most value. But now there's 20 different ones to be argued at each guy. Which one's the one, and how do the other ones correlate? It's almost, they cannibalize each other.
However, I will say that's kind of what makes the hobby. Different people like different things, and so what might not be for you or I, there's it might not be for myself or yourself, will be for anybody. Like, for example, you like Prism, I like Prism, basketball, football, But someone else might like Donruss or Optic. Maybe they don't like the Prism look. Maybe they don't like the chrome. They like the old school paper, style card. That's what I think allows these companies to continue to put out all these products, because they're appealing to everybody. You or I may like 3 or 4 different sets, but someone else might like 3 or 4 different sets.
Right.
So that's why I think they don't really cannibalize each other, but I do see what you're saying in terms of hurting the value of some, because there are so many different rookies that you can get for a certain player, or even cards. Doesn't even have to be a rookie.
Right.
I mean, there's, if you like Serge Ibaka, there's 40
Plenty
or 50
of different color variations within each product. So there's something to collect, but I'm more speaking to, when do things fall off of that cliff where it's too much because even having collections of certain guys or investing in certain guys, I feel like there's a certain point where it really starts to water things down, or at least it just, after a release that's exciting for a week, and then it just falls off, whatever brands these may be, because you have your main players. So how many players can be in the game up to a point? In what I just said was that release hype that comes around. There's so many product releases. You can check out schedules online. They're everywhere. You find them in stores, or you don't find them in stores because they're sold out, and you go and buy them on the secondary market. But you can see all these different products, what to think of them. And as they come out, you want that new product, but it wears down to the same few brands. And then I feel like, having the $10, $20 options is great in a lot of ways to bring people in that aren't trying to spend hundreds into thousands of dollars, depending on the cards. But when is it too much? Well, go ahead.
No. So I think I get what you're saying. Like, I think, again, it goes back to, there's different levels of collectors. There's different levels of investors. There's cards that you and I would, this goes into deeper stuff that we'll eventually touch on, but there's stuff that you and I will buy and we will flip because we know the initial, markup on them will be good. We'll make some good money on them, and that's it. We'll forget about them. We probably won't touch them or buy them again. And then there's other cards that we know have longer term investment potential, and so we'll maybe hold on to those a little bit longer. But that actually brings me into a little comment here from Investicard. Says, do you think mellow ball cards will have the same type of hype as last year's rookie class? Which, I guess that would have to either be Zion, Ja. Personally, I think LaMelo Ball is going to be a phenomenal player. I really do. I think he's going to be, I'm not necessarily sure all-star, but I think he's going to be a above average NBA player. But no one will ever compare to the hype, at least in the next, short while here. No one will touch. I don't even know if anyone ever touches his hype.
The Zion hype wasn't all about Zion.
Right.
And that's what that is. The Zion hype wasn't all Zion hype. It was literally simultaneous to the industry booming.
Right. I can see that.
And while Zion's hype was something else, don't get me wrong.
Nothing since we've seen since LeBron.
Right. So on top of that correlation, he was everything on ESPN. Playing in college. Not to mention, there wasn't so much going on in the world outside of sports as there is now. We haven't seen the things we've seen. There's been a drop off in certain ratings with the NBA, certain popularity or just certain attention. Maybe it's just for the time being. You would hope so. Nonetheless, LaMelo's a different animal where, he's the younger brother of a guy who was in the league, or going to be drafted, right. Part of the Ball brothers. And, there was LeVar and the big baller brand and all that. So in a different sense, he has a lot of initial popularity, but the hype around his game is not nearly amplified in the way that Zion was to begin with. And then just to drown out more of that noise, everything's taken place with the pandemic, with social justice issues. So it really drowned out that sound. And while LaMelo, again, be a really good player and a popular name in a lot of ways, it hasn't drawn nearly the same attention that it otherwise would have.
Benjamin Joshua commented in and said, "No way we see the hype like Ja and Zion."
Right.
I pretty much agree. I couldn't agree more. Really.
Well, Ja wasn't even hyped. That's the interesting thing. It happened so quickly after that NCAA tournament that all of a sudden he turned everybody's head around. Right. But I still, on top of that, might even agree, because there was so much more attention on basketball, so much more attention on the prospect class, maybe even because of Zion for Ja, that I still think Ja's was even more than LaMelo's is. I don't even think people realize that the draft is coming up.
Yeah, there were a lot of, even myself personally, I actually forgot it was next week. Obviously things are a little wild this year, 2020 and pandemic and everything's shifted all over the place. But it's exciting to kind of get back to some sort of maybe normalcy, I guess you could say. Having the NBA draft and then knowing the season starts a month after that,
right.
And then sure, a little bit of a shortened season, 72 games, and it's going to be a strange schedule, but hopefully people back in stands and the arenas, and I think honestly the card market can only see a benefit of actually people getting back into arenas, because when people get there in front, player goes off, Luka drops a 40-point triple-double, right. What are these guys going to go home and do? Anybody who's remotely interested in the hobby, they're going to want to go and have his cards.
In the same way that they're adding sports books into arenas.
Right.
If you're at the game, if we're going to a game, I'm way more likely to go, hey, I'm throwing 20 on that money line. In the same way that I can go, I like him coming off the bench, or somebody's injured and this young guy is starting tonight, I'm going to go buy into some of his cards real quickly. It's 100%. The same thing. That's that correlation I was mentioning earlier. I would hope that people coming back in will breed that. It's not going to be in time, unfortunately, for what's going on right now with that draft. Guys like LaMelo. It's a solid class. There are names that are projected to be guys that are really going to come into the NBA and contribute. And I don't think people are really aware of them. The specials are not the same. You'd usually see a ton more coverage leading up to something like this.
We're definitely lacking the coverage.
Right. It's getting really squeezed in. And, we even just saw a product release for Prism Draft.
Right.
Just came out. So Prism Draft is the collegiate version of the NBA's, Prism card. It's the college version. It's the draft classes specifically, and only the draft classes of the guys coming out of college.
No veterans, no nothing.
So
there's no Zion, there's no Ja. It's just the guys that are going to be in this next week's draft.
It's a draft collection, and it's an interesting set, because when I look at something like that, with a lot of the principles, a lot of the market goes by, it is the first card appearance in a major brand of a lot of these guys. Now, it's not the pro uni. It's not the pro uniform.
Collegiate.
Which is the only thing I think takes away from it, but it's still their first appearance out of a major brand of
Zion
cards.
Still sell very well.
Right.
I think also he had Duke attached, which
that's a brand in itself.
Yeah, Duke is its own brand, so that really helps sell the card as well. You have some people that are strictly collegiate, college basketball fans.
Right.
They don't care about the NBA. They follow college basketball. That right there, you'll see Zion's draft cards still sell very well in comparison to some of your lesser guys, like say Cam Reddish.
Well, we're using Zion. I was just going to mention that. So what about the other guys? Because Zion was unworldly hype. So if we bring it back down to level, are LaMelo Ball's cards? He can play well. He can come in. Are they going to hold anywhere near that kind of potential value? Because the drop off from Zion's first pro cards, to his college cards, yes, college cards still had value, but the pro card value is so much further above and beyond. It makes me wonder, okay, no one else is going to get that kind of hype. So if one of Zion's cards graded up on the market is doing $100, and that's the main card out of Prism Draft, then what's LaMelo Ball's base when graded up? What is his card coming out of there? Can it match up? Is it $50? And if he plays well, it goes up to 60 to 70. It's an interesting thing to me, because these are the first cards depicting the guy, and the only difference is the uniform. Is it going to be about what college they went to, what team they played for?
Also remember, though, that Prism Draft last year for basketball was the first time that ever actually came out. Right. While they had Prism Draft for football and stuff in the past, Prism Draft basketball was last year. Panini capitalized on the Zion market. Right. They said, let's get Zion to print ASAP. therefore, there's no real telling, what LaMelo could do in the future. I mean, if LaMelo comes out an above average NBA player, superstar, scoring points, assists, dropping
if he was a
dimes,
Nick?
Right. If he becomes a Nick, his first cards could outsell the Zion card. If he gets drafted by the Knicks, I could see his Prism draft card outselling the Zion Prism
Pure
draft.
stupidity, but yeah.
But that's part of the market that we're in.
Right.
I mean, that's what makes the market the market. Is it's what's not for me might be for you, and what's not for you might be for me. So, there's going to be opportunities like that. There's going to be things that sell higher or lower than you believe they should.
It's very reactive.
Right. Very reactive.
Yeah, and
reactive.
On a quick, stop of a dime, it's just going to be swapping over. And I've seen things in 24-hour spans crash. I've seen them spike. I've seen them spike, crash, and then spike again. So you got to be careful on entering these new things from investment standpoints. I mean, have all the fun in the world, but talking about that new product with Prism Draft, let's talk about the draft itself then. We're sitting here after an NBA season, feels like just ended. It just happened. I just watched LeBron and Anthony Davis in the locker room and the Lakers doing the whole thing and the Kobe chants in the streets and the whole thing. It was great. NBA season starts in a few weeks.
4 weeks, literally.
So here we are.
5 weeks now. 5 weeks.
Right.
Now.
Whatever it is, it's unbelievable the time frame, specifically aside from the card market, to talk about the game itself, how it's going to affect these guys. A group's about to be drafted, this class, in a week.
1 week.
They're going to wake up, they're going to be part of a team, and have weeks before they debut on the biggest stage there is in the sport.
Yep.
These teams are recovering. I read something, it was the exact number of days for a team recovering from the pandemic. Like, I shouldn't say recovering from the pandemic, but recovering from playing in the bubble compared to the teams that never came to play in the NBA bubble for that latter. It was 200 plus days compared to 70 something by the time we hop back on the court here. So this is going to affect these teams. Is that going to influence for you where you're buying, maybe where you're looking, what you're anticipating and seeing early on in the season, at least?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to be looking at the teams that were not in the bubble because a lot of those guys were forgotten about. Not to get too specific or anything like that at the moment, and not to get too deep, but guys like on the Hawks, Trae Young, guys with the Timberwolves, D'Angelo Russell, maybe Karl Anthony Towns, guys that are forgotten about that have superstar potential. Their cards are probably a lot cheaper than a guy like Zion, Ja Morant. So, I mean, those are definitely good places to look for value. Brad Quintner commented, said, big market, big sales. It's going back to the Melo thing, LaMelo Ball. Goes to the Knicks. Those cards are going to be expensive. There's no doubt about that. And there was another comment here I wanted to get to. I'll let you go first on that. It's from Jake Friel. He asked, what got you into collecting and selling cards?
Thanks for the question, Jake. I mean, I grew up an avid sports fan. Just to turn heel here, it was all I did. I was into memorabilia at first. I had an autograph collection. When I was younger, I used to have my parents take me to the signings and meet the players and go to the games and all that stuff. So I loved being around it. A lot of guys I looked up to playing all the sports when I was younger. I had cards. I think a lot of, younger guys did. And then came through a stage where I didn't have any of it. I was still into the memorabilia stuff. And all of a sudden I revisited, started looking at it again a little bit. But like I said, I came back in as a hobby and really was enjoying it as an art, as that. I was kind of an outsider to the whole thing. And it built up quickly where I saw the monetary aspect. But for me, I never envisioned doing this full on as a business or doing it full time. It kind of happened where I wanted the hobby, the industry to pay for itself for me to do. I wanted to really enjoy it. it wasn't out of, I want to make money on money on money. It was, I wanted to turn my collection or things I was buying in an industry I'm beginning to understand into more money so I can dig it back in and do it again. I never perceived the possibility of doing it at a rampant pace and being able to really make something of that to that kind of extent.
Right.
It just sort of happened. I'm incredibly grateful for that. But it strings from passion. So to answer your question, it was an absolute love for it that I'm grateful turned into a business of its own. But really, it stemmed from a love for what I was doing, because the only reason it turned monetary was to let me be able to do that even more than I was already doing. So that's really what it was for me.
Right. And to piggyback off that, essentially, for me as a kid, my dad really got me into it first and foremost, I guess. From a young age, I was going through cards, and my dad would bring home. I would look at them, love sports. He had me into sports very, very young. And when I got to be 10 years old was the home run race between McGwire and Sammy Sosa. And throughout the early years there, the mid-90s, my dad had accumulated a ton of McGwire and Sosa cards. So what did he have me do? He taught me, how to go out and sell. So in 1998, I was at a flea market almost every weekend during the summer selling Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa cards. And from there, just developed the passion for the whole aspect of it. I had my own little collection at the time. I had stuff I was trying to sell, to buy other cards that I wanted. And my whole life I've been doing this since then. So you're talking about 22, 23 years now. And I think what really pushed me over the edge essentially was when I got old enough to realize that I could do enough where the stuff that I wanted to keep as a collector could be mine, essentially for free, because I'm making margins on other cards that I buy. And that all ties in to what I do now, essentially, which is cards full time. You buy them, you sell them, you grade them. There's so many different things to do within this industry. And I think for me, it would definitely be my dad is what got me into it. And I'm extremely grateful for that, because it's something that I've never really weaned off of. I've always been involved in some way or another. There were times where I was definitely more of a collector because I didn't have the time. I was doing the college thing, doing the job after college. But now this is what I do, and extremely grateful for it.
Yeah, and when we say that, it's literally what we do. We're with each other quite a bit of the time just working on this. And Jake, it was a simple question, but an important one, because it's just a reminder of what that is. It's really easy to get tied up in all that on a day-to-day basis. For us, we're working hard trying to make the most of it. And Tom hopping in here. Yeah, we are literally sitting in a hurricane. We got blacked out in terms of energy about 30 minutes before we're supposed to.
30 minutes before we went.
Tom got hit. So all in all, grateful just to be on here right now tonight with you guys. But continuing with our discussion for tonight, going back to that NBA discussion.
Yeah.
Coming back quickly, talked about how it may affect may affect values here, but what do you think will be the greatest benefit of the quick turnaround back into the NBA season, a new season?
Who or what?
What do you think? Well, and who do you think will benefit the most?
I think some of these teams that maybe are, obviously we have. Let me backtrack that for a second. We have a whole offseason too, not to mention, not just a draft. We have a whole offseason of free agency and everything all to take place in the next 5 weeks.
Yeah, a whole offseason.
Yeah, whole offseason, 5 weeks, maybe 5.5 weeks we're talking. So, you're talking less than 40 days. Guys have no idea what team they may be going to join. No one has any idea who may be traded, where they may be going. The draft night, I think, is going to be loaded with trades this year. I think you're going to see an unprecedented number of trades. I think a lot of guys that are, free agents currently, probably in their minds have an idea of where they want to go or who they may be talking to, because let's face it, while there may be all kinds of rules in place where you can't talk to this player, that player, let's face it, they're talking to people. So I think what you're going to see is the teams who were playing in the bubble and stay more together, essentially, like don't lose as many guys, maybe only add a piece or two. I think those teams may benefit because they're going to have that chemistry. You have a lot of teams.
What about the Warriors? When you said that, what about the Warriors?
So the Warriors are a team that are bringing back two injured stars, basically. You're bringing back Curry, you're bringing back Thompson. You're also adding in the second pick in the draft, potentially, if they don't trade it. That's all, up to be seen. A lot of young players this past year. Pascal, Kai Bowman, who else am I missing? The other guard, Jordan Poole.
In terms of this turnaround, though, they're going to come in. Yes, they were injured, and we have to see how they react to coming back into the mix, but they're going against, for the most part, groups of guys that are worn down and didn't have nearly enough rest. So is there a balance there? Guys being fatigued still a bit coming off that season compared to guys that have had all this time to recover? I feel like it might balance itself somewhere in the middle.
But I think these guys are such superior athletes, and the way that the rest, I've seen parts of the schedule, and the way that they're laying the schedule out, there's a little more gaps sometimes in between games. Like once they travel, there's a couple days in a row they'll play, but then they'll have a few off days. And I think that differentiating rest schedule now this year will kind of make up for those teams that are, coming off the bubble. I really don't think you're going to see, too many of these top tier teams, top tier players struggle at all. They're premier athletes for a reason.
A different angle on that. How about the Brooklyn Nets? So all of a sudden, a team with a lot of hype, not cohesive, haven't played together, but have no fatigue because the main guys they're leaning on are going to be out there and fresh. And while you can make some kind of argument that the other guys could be fatigued, they were out earlier in the playoffs. They got an extra month and a half to 2 months rest, and they were starting to click as a unit. That team was becoming a real pain to play against. All of a sudden, they might be energized by the fact that they're getting their star guys back in there. I mean, they've never gotten Durant, who may be, when healthy, the best player that is on the planet currently. Yet to be seen when healthy, but it's going to be really interesting. All these reactions, relating it back to the card market, looking at teams across the league that were there, it was very evenly balanced. For the first time in a long time, you couldn't pinpoint exactly who was going to be there at the end. And I feel for the first time in some years, every team had a big three. Every team, had something going on. All of a sudden, it was just kind of like big twos across the entire span of the main teams in the league.
Yeah.
So Brittany Cole hopped in here. Does Giannis cards increase in value? Does Giannis cards increase in value if he leaves Milwaukee for a big market winning team? So for something like that, another good discussion, as far as the Bucks ended off at the end of the season from where they were supposed to be, they were only so far off. It was very competitive.
Right. They are a winning team.
Right. And Giannis underperformed a bit, but if you go back to those first few games of that series where they got knocked off early, it could have easily been a 2-2 series. It could have been a 3-1 series the other way. And then they go on and get hot and win the whole thing the way this is working. Now, the question is if he leaves for a big market winning team.
I think if he joins another superstar.
Well, the Bucks are a winning team.
Yes.
And any team that has him on it, I think alone, is going to be a very winning team just based on what he contributes.
I think if he pairs with another superstar,
the hype will be absurd.
Yes, correct. That's where I can see, it doesn't even necessarily have to be a big market.
Right.
I mean, obviously Dallas, for example, could potentially be a spot. Not, it's not LA, it's not New York, but Dallas is a big market.
Well, let's also remember, and just being precise with the question being an increase in value. There's a lot during these seasons in anticipation of him living up to that potential that, he's gonna get over the hump and he's gonna win that, which really brought the prices up. And as soon as they lost, they came all the way down. Now, in an offseason, if they don't do it again, if they get knocked off in the first round, prices are going to slide down. And as free agency rumors start to come up, all of a sudden, if Giannis goes to a big market team, you're going to see a wild spike, whether it's Miami, whether it's Dallas. I mean, a popular market, a team up, even if it's not a popular market, a team up with superstars which he hasn't really had to this point in his career, it's going to get him there for sure.
Yeah, anytime you see a superstar change teams, that fan base goes nuts. Thus, cards go nuts. Right. Not to mention, you have the investors, you have the people, the flippers per se, who hop in and say, hey, so-and-so is going to go here. Let me get some of their cards. I know the spike's coming. And which kind of superstars changing teams. Ryan Brodo comments, which card do you think would be more valuable? Harden in a Sixers uniform or jersey, or Russell Westbrook in a Clippers jersey? Philly market versus LA market. I mean, let me take that one first. I think, knowing what I know about the Philly market, I think Harden to the Sixers, while for some people it may not be perceived and loved, I think Harden to the Sixers would be massive in terms of the hobby. However, this is kind of where the card market is a little bit different. It would be his rookies that I would think you would see drastically increase.
Well, if we're going off key cards, I guess we'll use the main card.
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking a main card, because first card in a different jersey, that's a whole nother topic for another day. But I think you would see Harden's cards spike higher.
Either way, in my opinion.
I think so. I think Harden, he's more of a face for the league than Russell Westbrook is.
And I wouldn't even say face for the league. The point I was going to make was that's the guy if that team goes to a championship.
Oh, yeah.
Or carries them through the season. And while Russ is phenomenal, I'm a Russ fan, I am, he's not the guy on the Clippers. He might not even be the second guy if he goes,
if it's Russ and Kawhi, is what you're saying.
Right. So he isn't that. Harden is, in my opinion, if he goes to Philly. I think it's a wild.
I mean, Embiid might have something to say about that.
Sure, but talk to me when Embiid drops 40 a game. Like, it's just not
hobby-wise.
Right.
Yes, Harden all
very
day long,
statistic-driven, points-driven, numbers-driven.
Yeah.
I think Embiid does a lot of great things. I like Embiid as well a lot in investment purposes as well. That's that thinking outside the box. And thank you for the question, Ryan, on that. But thinking outside the box, maybe if you're thinking, hey, this is where Harden gets over that hump, everyone's going to be looking that way. Check on Embiid's prices.
He's going to have something to do with it if they're going.
Right. And that's that set of thinking, that intuition that we're kind of getting at. But that'll definitely be interesting. And going back to that Giannis comment for just a second, if you're ever going to buy Giannis, right now is probably the best time to do it.
If you didn't buy a year ago, yeah.
Well, I can't do that. So at this point,
it's
Giannis. If you are going to buy into Giannis, this might be the best time, barring any sort of, God forbid, freakish injury or, who knows what could happen. If he's going to be in the league contending year after year, now is the time, because this is the floor.
Yes.
He got knocked off early in the playoffs. If that happens again, it would reach the same kind of value, but it may be after a championship already, or maybe on a team that he's more expected to do it with the next year. This is the lowest it'll ever be. If he goes and teams up anywhere big, it doesn't matter. Even if they get knocked out of the playoffs, I think the floor is higher in that offseason, so it still won't be as opportunistic. If you're looking at a long-term hold, it's now and stick it in your pocket, because that's a guy I just can't imagine not finding a way to some risk.
It's kind of like, it kind of goes with that old quote, like they use for the stock market. It's the best time to buy into the stock market was 20 years ago, but if not 20 years ago, today. If you take that with LeBron, maybe not 20 years since LeBron has been around 20 years. But, Giannis is coming off his, sixth season in the league.
Yeah.
Sixth season in the league.
2013.
Yeah, so sixth year in the league. LeBron, after his 6th year in the league, if you take those values and put them to where LeBron's values are now, if you would have bought LeBron at that point, 6 years into his career, you'd be absolutely cleaning up right now. And for Giannis, that's a guy that's extremely talented. He's going to win. It's just a matter of how much.
Right.
And sure, obviously the question of when right now as well. I don't know if the Bucks roster as currently constructed is made for him. But yeah, I wholeheartedly agree on the Giannis. It's now or never.
If you look at a whole chart, a whole span, and we talked about the spike and the correction in the market, all those things taken into consideration, the level after the plateau that it's at now was always higher and leveled off from the time that the spike in the entire market took place to when they got eliminated from the playoffs, and it leveled out.
Right.
That's getting knocked off right there and the trajectory going back upward. That's what you're going to see. We're going to get towards the season. That hype's going to take place. If the Bucks are playing okay, it'll stay right there. If they're playing phenomenally well, people start to speculate again. Then you get in the playoffs. Then it happens again and they get knocked off. You're back at the 4. You're not losing at a level like that. If they win the whole thing, moves on to another market, all of that energy will reflect in the market. But talking a lot about the NBA here, real quick, I want to slide over to the NFL. Something that we haven't talked about yet. We're getting deep in the season. There'll be a lot more to talk about for us going forward in terms of the NFL, but a lot of things expected to this point. Nothing too surprising.
Maybe besides the NFC East.
I mean, I could have told you that was coming. Listen, we'll talk about the over-under of 5 wins to win a division, but not even about that in terms of card values and them being affected. There was the NFL season, and it was coming, and there was like a 2-week span where if you bought into absolutely anything that made any sense, you did really well, unless you held it past week 1.
Yeah.
And then it came down again, not a crash, but a correction, because it was a lot of excitement around the entire thing. And now we're to a point here where you're seeing what teams are emerging. We talked about those few teams. So breaking that out into a full discussion, what teams are you looking at? What players are you looking at specifically right now? Because I think legitimately it's already narrowed itself down realistically to
it is a very small field that I think are realistic.
I don't want to be naive and say things can't happen, but I'm sorry. I could already eliminate a playoff team in the NFC East component, right, whatever team comes out of there.
Right.
And then even further, there's probably a few teams that are set for the playoffs that just there's almost no way. But who are you looking at in terms of
realistic contenders?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the Saints right now, after what they went in, here this week to Tampa and did here, was kind of eye-opening.
For sure.
I mean, Breeze, while, everyone is saying, oh, Breeze can't do this, Breeze can't do that anymore, he's too old, his arm strength. Sean Payton has done a phenomenal job in, game planning, play calling, getting the ball out quick, getting the ball into Kamara's hands. When Thomas was out, Kamara saw like 25, 30 touches a game, which in this day and age, almost how many guys did you see do that?
Right.
Not many. So I think the Saints, for me, out of the NFC, I mean, have to be my front runner and my true contender and number 1 team there in the NFC. The Seahawks, that defense just scares me. Russie is unbelievable, but I don't know if he can come back
after what you saw the Bills just do to him. I was very high on Seattle, and I'm looking at a guy like DK Metcalf, when you see a position player who can literally take over a game, like he's been able to do all of a sudden. Invested a lot in his abilities and guys like that. I mean, Josh Allen, I think, will be an interesting player, come playoff time, because it's a risk for reward thing, if you ask me, across the board. And it's with DK Metcalf. I don't think there's too much risk. Seahawks get hot. I think there's a ton of reward. I think Josh Allen isn't expected to get to necessarily too high of a level, but if he pulls it off and the fan base that he happens to play for, if he's able to do something like that,
they're definitely a sleeper team for me in the AFC.
Right.
I would definitely go back to finish the NFC there. It would definitely be Saints, Seahawks for me at the top. And then switching over to the AFC, I mean, a lot of people are going to look at the Steelers and be like, oh, they're 8-0, the only undefeated team in the league. Go look at the schedule they played.
Right.
They haven't played very many above 500 teams. The Chiefs are the class of the AFC. They will be the class of the AFC as long as Patrick Mahomes is under center. It doesn't matter. I don't care what their defense looks like. I don't care what anything looks like. Patrick Mahomes is under center, and Andy Reid is coaching that team. They're the class of the AFC.
Right.
After the Chiefs, I think a lot of people want to look at the Ravens and Lamar Jackson, but Lamar has struggled big time.
Right.
That defense is what is winning them games. For me, it's clear cut Chiefs. I think it's Chiefs, Saints, Chiefs, Seahawks when it's all said and done this year. Which, for the card side, if you've got some Russell Wilson, if you've got some DK Metcalf, some Tyler Lockett type stuff, if you have Mahomes stuff, it's a great time. I don't think the Saints at the end of the day will outlast the Seahawks because I think Breeze will break down as the season goes along. I definitely am noticing the arm strength thing, and while Sean Payton has done a great job to this point, I think Pete Carroll won't let this not be the Seahawks year, if that makes sense.
Right. Well, I feel in terms of the NFL, the next few weeks are going to determine a lot of the discussion.
For sure.
So it's something we're definitely going to come back to as we're getting ready to wrap up here in the next couple minutes. Definitely want to talk about real quickly next week for us going into our next episode of Card Knocks. It's going to be a draft special, but not for the NFL, for the NBA, as we were discussing before. We're going to actually be covering that live. So tune in with us. Make sure to tune in with us for that to catch the draft, full analysis as we're going, talk about the impact
live
on
reactions,
cards, what these prospects mean for each team, how we think they did. And then again, looking at some of the cards, maybe even opening up some of the cards, having a little fun with it
looking
here.
to getting some Prism draft for next week so we can open some cards right here live.
And we'll show you guys some of what we've been chopping up here. Maybe even seeing the live impacts in our hands of what's happening based on what market they went to, the projections of those teams, and really digging into that. There's going to be a lot to talk about in terms of that. So don't miss that right here on A2D next week.
7 p.m. on Wednesday.
For sure. So it's been a lot of fun. Having a great time, and always a pleasure being around you as I get the opportunity to do so much. And, I think we're just going to keep having fun here.
For sure.
Could not be more grateful for the opportunity here. Our sponsor, Quick Rips. Make sure to check out quickripsbreaks.com for all your needs. That tag is along the bottom right there. So make sure you go check them out. They're going to have a lot of cool stuff for you to look at. If you're new, if you've been in the market, going to be bringing breaks to you soon live with new products. So really exciting stuff to look at there. Grateful to them. A2D, Tom, appreciate all you guys. And Bri, we're getting after it here, and we're going to do it all again next week.
That's it. Can't wait to get after it.
All right, guys. Well, look, thank you so much. We're going to wrap up here for episode 1. Happy to be here, and we're here to stay. So let's keep it going. Hope you enjoyed Card Knocks. We will see you next week.